Hello, Kidney Warriors! James here from Dadvice TV, your online kidney health coach, and this is Dadvice TV Live. Now, for those of you that are new, welcome. Great to have you here. Really appreciate it. Go ahead, when you're done, go over to YouTube, subscribe to the Dadvice TV channel because you're going to love the content and our co-host today, and you're going to want more of this. And if you haven't done so already, please, for me, everybody, go over to YouTube and subscribe to Dadvice TV. Did you know that about 85% of the people who watch the videos haven't subscribed? Oh boy, if we could get more subscribers, we would get bigger numbers and attract even more attention out in that kidney community. Now, real quickly, for those that are new, my name is James. I'm a kidney warrior. I was diagnosed stage 5 about 2.5 years ago. I've worked on diet and lifestyle changes, started exercising and moving, watching what I ate, and I got my health better. And as my health improved, so did my labs. And I'm now right on that border of stage 3, stage 4. But more importantly, I feel great, have a ton of energy, and I am not letting kidney disease hold me down. Now, tonight, we're going to talk about something that, well, it's part of having kidney disease, and it is going and getting labs. You know, getting that blood drawn, getting those results, watching those numbers. And since COVID has kind of gotten under control here in the United States, I've been getting my labs often. Had high uric acid. I didn't take care of myself right, but now my uric acid's down in the normal range, and I am ecstatic. My labs are looking great. Pretty much the only number that's not good is that creatinine. We're going to talk about that one, but there's not a whole lot I can do about that, but I feel great. So let's get right to our co-host today. You guys know her. You guys love her. Can't believe it's been 3 weeks since her and I did a show together. Our schedule, me working and traveling and all sorts of things. We were kind of out of sync for a little bit, but she is back. And boy, we have a lot of people here. I know, excited to see her. Everyone, welcome Jen Hernandez from PlantPoweredKidneys.com. Hey, Jen.
Hi, James. I know we were just talking about how long it's been, and it feels like forever, but I am so excited that we're reconnecting. And again, super excited to be talking about our renal function panel labs tonight. I know this is such a great topic, so really excited to dive into that with you and everybody watching.
Yeah, and for those that are new, tell them why a renal dietitian is one of the most important people you can work with when you have kidney disease.
Well, if you happen to watch the live that I did this morning about this topic, the information that you get from your labs really correlates a lot with your diet. And a lot of people say, well, my nephrologist says I don't need a dietitian yet. But if they ever say, follow this, follow that, take this, eat this, do that for your diet, that is an indicator that you should be working with a dietitian. We specialize in food. That is our entire session. All the stuff that we work on together, we look at your diet, we look at what you should be having, what you shouldn't be having. And we want to make sure that whatever it is, it's food that you do enjoy and that you can see and feel how it helps you feel so much better, keeps your kidneys healthy, safe, and protected while giving you the nutrition that you need and avoiding the stuff that you don't need. So renal dietitian is such a great part of your healthcare team that can spend the time that you need and that you want to spend time on talking about your own personal diet and your food preferences.
And where can they learn more about you and eating a plant-based diet?
Well, our website is plantpoweredkidneys.com. You can also find our free Facebook group, Plant Powered Kidneys. And then you can also find me on Instagram at plant.powered.kidneys. That is where we share a lot of information. Almost every single day, we're putting out a different tip, resource, information about food related to kidney health and nutrition related to kidney health. So you can find us in all those areas and learn a ton, especially our blog. Every week we have new articles coming out focused on a different topic that we get a lot of questions about. So For example, today we're going to be talking about labs. We talked about what to do with a kidney specialist, your doctor, some good questions to ask, which I also included some free downloads that you could get there as well. We have a comprehensive guide for CKD stage 3 that is totally free on our blog. So much information. That's probably the best place you're going to get so much information is at the website.
Awesome. All right, we already have a few questions here. Someone asked me, what makes your uric acid high? Well, not having good kidneys is definitely something that's going to help your uric acid go higher. And I kind of got into a rut with certain foods. I was living off of asparagus and cauliflower, it felt like. And I ate, let me tell you guys, a lot of asparagus, which is one of those things that helps get your uric acid up there. And I think just doctors had to change my medication, but got it all back down to where it was normal. And one other person Karen asked, what's it mean when your GFR is between two numbers? Well, your GFR, and we're going to talk about it in a moment, it fluctuates constantly. And that one number we typically get, that's just at this moment in time. It could change a few points up, a few points down. So if your labs are giving you between two numbers, it's somewhere in there. That's probably just the average thing that's going up and down. But I don't want you guys to focus too much on that. Yeah, what were you going to say?
I was just going to add, I have seen that on some of my clients' lab reports. Instead of having just one GFR, they give a range now because of that exact reason that you mentioned,
I like
James.
that. I like the range.
I do too. I think because it's a snapshot of what's happening at that moment. So the range gives some idea of like the flexibility of it's in this area. It could be a little bit above, it could be a little bit below, but it helps rather than focusing on one very specific number that you look at the bigger picture and understand that it's pretty fluid and that it can change.
Yeah, and I've been getting labs like unbelievably often. It's almost as often as the beginning. And I may have a 29, I may have a 30, I may have a 31, may have a 33, may have a 29, a 32. It fluctuates. And I've gotten so used to it that I'm like, yeah, I'm stable. That's where I'm at. That little change. So I love the idea of giving a range. That's awesome. Because I think we get a little too focused on that number instead of our overall health and any symptoms we may have. So let's talk about what we got to do to get that number. We got to get our labs done. And you called them something a little bit differently than what I usually call them. I usually just say labs. You called it the official name. And what is that?
So the official name is Renal Function Panel or Renal Function Tests. And the reason that I use this specific term is because labs like that's an umbrella of a category. That's like saying I'm going to see my doctor. And it's like, is it my primary doctor? Is it my kidney doctor? Is it my heart doctor? Is it my diabetes doctor? The doctor term is just like the labs term. It's very, very big. There are tons of different kinds of labs. So tonight we're going to focus specifically on what is called the renal function panel. So if you look at your lab test results, you might see it across the top and it'll give you that label of what that group of lab results is categorized as.
Very good. Now, one thing which I would love for us to dive into before we get into what all is on those labs is preparing for the labs. I know a lot of people, well, they know being properly hydrated is important. So they're on their way to the doctor. They got a 20-minute drive and they're guzzling water, which is not the right way to prepare. How should I prepare before I get my labs done?
So one of the things that you want to make sure is that you're talking with your doctor about getting this specifically renal function panel. So this is an order that comes from your doctor. It's not something that you necessarily will just go to the lab and get drawn, and they'll need to order it for you. So it will be under that doctor's responsibility in working with you on those results. So make sure you know which doctor it is that's ordering your renal function panel so that you will know who to go to. And not everybody gets a renal function panel. If you have a diagnosis of CKD, it's more likely you're going to be getting the renal function panel, but you may also get it if you have a family history or if you have health issues that could lead to kidney damage like high blood pressure or diabetes. So in preparing and getting ready for them. You're totally right, James. It is not a matter of drinking a bunch of water right before your lab because that is kind of like cramming for a test in school. Like it doesn't really do a whole lot for you, and it's just going to skew the results. It's not going to show what you actually learned. So, uh,
Exactly. It's only going to make
yeah,
that
downing a
number on the
bunch of water.
scale bigger, guys.
Yeah,
Don't be guzzling a bunch of water on your way to the doctor to get your labs done. You're only increasing your weight. It's going to
yeah.
sit in your stomach.
Yeah, and tonight we will definitely talk about some of the labs that can be influenced based off of your water intake because it can be if you drink too much water or if you don't drink enough water. Either way, that can impact some of your lab results, and then those results won't be as helpful because you've altered them from drinking too much or not enough.
Yep. And how often do you recommend a person getting their labs done?
It can be anywhere from 6 months down to each month. It really depends on the situation. Usually, for people who are in later stages and have maybe some other medical issues going on, or some labs are looking pretty funky, they might be getting drawn more often to be checking a certain result, to be checking to see what's going on. For somebody who's stable, like I know you yourself, James, have talked about that for when you get your lab draws and you've
Yep.
you've talked with your doctor about that routine, which is one of those really good questions to have with your kidney specialist. I when I work with my clients, I typically recommend they get them at least every 3 months. Um, to me, that is a good time to give us time to make some changes and to focus on actionable steps in taking care of the kidneys and then to analyze the results. Sometimes, if they get drawn too much, you're not giving yourself enough time to make a change and you're just looking for the results without actually doing that change. So, you want to make sure that you do give yourself enough time. And sometimes these labs, they don't move very fast. So, there's not really a point in getting them drawn so often because they're
Mhm.
not going to change that quickly. But there are some labs that do change pretty fast and can be tested quickly. For example, hemoglobin or potassium. If your potassium, which can be deadly if it's out of range, that could be checked the next day or the day after, depending on what the medical treatment is for you in that situation. So, talk with your doctor about how often it should be tested. If you have a good plan in place, if you're making changes, if you're working with a dietitian, that is good justification to get more frequent lab draws because you're doing something and you want to see what those results are. But if you're not doing anything about it, then, maybe every 6 months or so is going to be enough.
Yep. And during COVID, I actually went almost a full year. Actually, I went a full year without getting labs. I felt good.
Mhm.
Nothing felt different. And then when I went and I got my labs, that's when my uric acid had gotten out of control. And it got out of control because I didn't know. I didn't do those labs and I didn't know, hey, uric acid is getting out of control.
Mhm.
Let's work on something. What do I got to do? So it got really high, and now I'm doing labs very often because we're getting it under control. The doctor wants every 3 weeks. Let's see how the medication is doing. Do we need to increase it, decrease it? Do we need to try something
Right.
else? So it's exactly what you were saying. You got to figure out if you're doing something, you may want to get them more often so you can see have we made progress, but you do got to give it time for things to happen. Right
Mhm.
now, if I got them every day, all it would do is cost me a fortune, and
Yeah.
and probably it wouldn't do any good because I don't have enough time for these changes that I'm trying to
Yeah.
accomplish. But the good news is I'm
It would
seeing
probably cause a lot of
progress.
stress.
Yeah, exactly. And
It would
and,
probably
and
be
you know,
very
waiting
stressful.
as a kidney patient, no matter what, guys, I'm in the same boat. We all get so stressed out waiting for those results, and I get mine real quick on my phone and stuff. It's still stressful, and I feel
Yeah.
great. I'm like, hey, I feel good. I know the numbers are going to be good, but I'm still like, oh no, come on, come on, come on, come on. Where are they? I keep checking my phone. Maybe
Mhm.
I missed it. Now, when we do get labs, how long does it typically take to get results based on your experience?
So typically it's like a 24-hour turnaround. It might take a little bit longer just based off of requiring a doctor to sign off and acknowledge essentially that they reviewed the labs or reviewed labs from the lab company. So it can be a little bit longer, but it is a pretty fast process because the time from getting that blood sample and then to testing it, pulling those results and everything, that is supposed to be a pretty quick process. So the longest I've seen is like a couple days before somebody has access to those results. In some cases, you might wait a little bit longer because your doctor might say, I need to review these with you in person. So you need to make an appointment to review your labs. So that can also be the case. If you have an electronic client portal, which we've talked about, I mean, I know you do, many people have these electronic portals that you could get access to your labs literally 24 hours later. But that may or may not be the case. That may or may not be an option for you. But your doctor or your doctor's office should let you know once they do have the results for you, which should be pretty soon.
Yeah, in the beginning, my doctors always made me wait. They got the results and then they discussed them with me to make
Mhm.
sure I didn't misinterpret them. Now
Exactly.
I'm set up both at the hospital and through the lab that my family doctor used, depending on where I get my labs, to where they get approved automatically so I can see them because they know now I'm not going to get overexcited or over worried if some numbers not exactly where I wanted it to be. I've
Mhm.
kind of learned, okay, yep, if that one's high or that one's low, we'll just work on that one for the next one, getting it back under control where it should be. Now, when
Yeah,
they
I
went,
know I'm
oh, go ahead.
I know personally if I got lab results and I saw something that had the big H for high or the big L for low on it,
And they're red. They're
I
big
wouldn't
red
be,
things on
yeah.
them too, to make
Oh
us
yeah.
feel
Like
a
that's
little more anxious.
exactly. Exactly. I know I would automatically go to Dr. Google and be like, what do I got to do? What do I got to figure out? But
That's
that's
what I
what a
used to
lot of
do.
doctors,
No,
yeah.
no
And
more.
that's what doctors will hold the labs for in some cases is they, again, just as like this situation, they don't want you to be panicking. They don't want you to go and try to figure out some kind of weird buy $100 worth of this thing to take care of this problem kind of thing. They don't want you to do that. So they're protecting you from yourself. It sounds weird, but really, they're protecting you from the internet.
I agree 100%. And it took a while for my doctors to feel comfortable with me to where I can get the labs right away. I don't need to
Hmm.
wait for them to explain them to me, only because they know I'm not going to panic. I'm not going to go out there and suddenly go crazy buying something or trying some extreme thing to get something back higher or lower. I
Hmm.
see them. They are what they are. I've gotten so comfortable with them. I don't panic. I just know, okay, that's what we're going to work on. The next plan is going to be getting that number up or down a little bit.
Hmm.
Now, when we get our labs, they're drawing blood, taking a little bit of blood. Do we need to fast in case someone's new here and they haven't done it? I see it on all my labs. It'll say fasting or non-fasting. And when I
Hmm.
go to the hospital, they ask me, have you been fasting? I never do. Um, what do we need to know about fasting before labs?
So the renal function panel specifically doesn't require fasting. You don't need to fast for the kidney blood tests. There are other blood tests that may require fasting. So depending on what your doctor is ordering, what your doctor wants to be looking at, you may be instructed to fast. And a fast could be anywhere from like 8 to 12 hours. So you definitely, in talking with that doctor who's getting you set up for labs, you should find out if fasting is required or not. If they don't specify it, then it's probably going to be safe to assume that you don't need to be fasting because they haven't told you directly you need to be fasting. But the renal panel itself doesn't require fasting. It doesn't make a significant change in your labs. And I mean, I can only imagine when I worked in dialysis, we would get these renal panels every single month.
Mm-hmm.
And my poor patients, I don't want to tell them not to eat, to tell them to fast for that long. They already have a very busy
Exactly.
schedule. It is, yeah, so it is not necessary to fast. And in fact, if you fast for too long, that can actually impact your blood test results. So you want to be really careful with if you're fasting to make sure that you're following the doctor's orders to fast or not fast and for how long.
Yep. And our goal as kidney patients is accurate results, everybody. We
Yeah.
want accuracy. We don't want to try to game the system to make something artificially look better, because we're not doing any good for ourselves or for our healthcare team who's going to use our labs as a roadmap to help us move forward in the right direction. We want accuracy. So don't try, okay, I'm going to fast for 3 days because it'll make my BUN look better. And we'll discuss what a BUN is in a few moments. Don't do that. We want accuracy. We need the results from these labs so that we can make the right decisions and right adjustments or celebrate the successes we've had. We need that. So don't try to game the system. I would love to see my creatinine drop down to 0.9 or something like that. Oh, I'd be ecstatic. But if I did something stupid like overhydrated and fasted for, I don't know, a week or something, and I'm not saying that that would work, but if I did a whole bunch of bad stuff like that just to get that number temporarily, artificially down, I'm not helping myself. I know it's not real.
Right.
So let's focus on the real
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, if anything, it's just going to lead to a bunch of questions from your doctor,
Mhm.
from your dietitian. They're going to be like, what is happening? Like, what is going on? Because your numbers are all over the place, super funky.
Yep.
And any of those kind of like extreme ideas of solutions are not actually solutions. That is
Mhm.
not, it's not anything that's going to give you the answers that you're looking for when it comes to taking care of your kidneys.
Yep. Now, in our labs, a few of the things we're looking at first is the waste products. What are
Mhm.
those and where should the numbers be? How do we understand if it's good or it's bad?
Yeah, so when we talk about these ranges tonight, I'll give you guys the reference ranges, like the general amounts, and then I'll talk about maybe some different areas of where it may be off that reference range. So the first waste product we have is your BUN, blood urea nitrogen. Now, this is a component that comes from our diet. It comes from the protein that we're eating. In general, the BUN is going to be below 20. That's the general guidelines. And if it's creeping up a little bit higher, that can be indicative of maybe a little too much protein in the diet, too much energy overall, too many calories overall in the diet. And it's basically building up because the kidneys aren't able to manage it. They're not able to filter that kind of waste. Now, for people on dialysis, which I know we do have people on dialysis watching us, your BUN won't be on your lab report that you get from your dietitian, but it is checked. And as a dietitian who used to work in dialysis, I did look at BUN that would tell me if my patients were eating enough because the dialysis process takes protein out of the body, so we need to put it back in. So BUN for people on dialysis was typically seen around 75, which sounds crazy high for those of you not on dialysis. But
Yeah.
that collection, yeah, it seems really, really weird. But if I saw a BUN that was down like in the 40s, I would be concerned that they're not eating enough because their BUN is so low compared to that kind of altered reference range for dialysis, what we see when people are eating more protein in the diet. So it's really, really different person to person, especially in dialysis, which is why, thank goodness, there are dietitians that work in dialysis and can help look at these things along with the doctor. Doctors will also look at the BUN. I mean, I've had great rounds with nephrologists in the dialysis company or in the dialysis facilities where we would go and check those numbers. We'd go around and see all the patients together and chat about how they're doing. And BUN is one of those things we're looking at the trend to see kind of where the normal level is. And if there's any big changes, that can be a sign of something is going on. So with back to the focus of CKD not on dialysis, it's again associated with protein. So keeping it closer to that reference range, keeping it closer to that goal range, this is in part where that low protein diet comes in place. And we've talked about low protein diet before. We've talked about even the low protein with keto analogs. This is one of the labs that we look at in protein management. So there's a whole other episode. We've talked about that. I have a whole other blog article where we've covered low protein diet. But if you want to learn more about that association and looking more at protein in the diet, that would be another place to look at specifically for BUN.
Yeah, and one cool thing I like about BUN is diet can impact it rather quickly.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I can tell the more plant-based I eat, the lower my BUN is. Back in the day when I ate a lot more animal protein, like cheeses and red meat, my BUN was high. It was in those dialysis ranges you were talking about. And my doctor kept telling me, my family doctor, eat more plants. I want more fruits, more vegetables. Get rid of that red meat. Just give it up for a month. Let's see what happens to your BUN. It's going to get better. And it did.
Yeah, it's one of the coolest things I think when I work with my clients as well. And one of the first things we do is that diet assessment, how much protein is in, then we kind of reassess how much protein they need. And they can see some really great changes in the BUN just by modifying their protein. They may not see the same kind of result from the GFR because again, that's kind of down the road. But for those first big wins, that BUN control is really fantastic.
Yeah. And then our other waste product, the one that I think kidney patients over focus on and many incorrectly believe is the problem, and it's not the problem, is creatinine.
Yes, creatinine, poor creatinine. It is a natural waste product that comes from our bodies because of just normal living. Yes,
Yes.
just by our
Breathing,
movement.
moving, muscles.
Exactly. The stuff we're supposed to be doing. The challenge is again that the kidneys aren't able to filter more of it out and then it builds up in the body. And that is the problem. So again, it's not it I'm trying to figure out it's not creatinine's fault. It's
Mhm.
just the kidney function isn't quite there, isn't able to take care of it. So for men, 0.6 to 1.2 milligrams per deciliter, or for females, it's zero point 0.5 to 1.1. There's a very slight drop there for the gender our body types and our body composition. But creatinine can also be affected by our age and even our physical activity. Again, like for
Mhm.
somebody who's doing more exercising, they might have a higher creatinine, and that's just with their muscles being used and broken down and built back up. The creatinine comes up a little bit higher there. So this when I mean, you and I both know it's inevitable someone's going to be asking about protein, asking about creatinine, saying, oh well, is creatinine, do I need to pay attention to creatinine for my diet? Creatinine is the waste product that's coming from our body. There was a study that found that eating meat just before a blood draw could show a slightly higher creatinine, but it could also be just falsely high and not actually associated with
Mhm.
what your levels truly are. So it's not the focus of what you can do to change, it's more of the outcome. So what are you going to do to keep your kidneys healthy so that they can filter the creatinine and keep that at a more manageable range for your body?
Yeah, and there's so much online focus on lowering your creatinine. That's not what we need to
Hmm.
focus on. We need to live healthy, be healthy, and perhaps our creatinine will go down naturally. Also, some races, or if you're a muscle builder, you've got a lot more muscle.
Hmm.
Your creatinine is going to be harder or higher. So that's taken into account in some formulas, but not all for muscle builders.
Hmm.
So don't get too worried about your creatinine or too focused on it. Focus
Yeah.
on everything else. And that was one of the first things it took me a while to accept with kidney
Hmm.
disease. My doctors all kept telling me, stop focusing on creatinine. And I kept saying, well, no, it's the problem because that's what the formula uses. They know it's not the problem. It's the indicator that we use. It's like blaming your scale for where the number is when you get on it. No,
Hmm.
it's not that. It's that what you're eating that's impacting that number and making it go big. It's not the scale's fault. It's something else, but we need to know that so that we can make the right choices. Now
Right.
you
And
mentioned,
somebody did ask
oh,
me,
good, good.
Oh, somebody did ask me earlier today about like at what number would a creatinine tell you to start dialysis? There's no this number means dialysis for creatinine. It comes back down to how you're feeling, if you're symptomatic or asymptomatic. That is really it. And you have a discussion with the nephrologist about starting dialysis and what that plan is, because it does require some things that you need to do ahead of time to prepare for dialysis. And while people want to avoid dialysis, I do think it's good to have that open communication and discussion with your nephrologist about your wishes for dialysis in that case of
Mhm.
emergency if they were to start it. So we don't need to go too much down that line, but just the idea of the creatinine, it doesn't mean a certain number in creatinine means start dialysis. That goes back to talking with your doctor.
Yeah. Now, the next thing that's on our labs is the protein in our blood, albumin.
Yes, which sounds like, oh, we're going to be talking about diet. Here we go, protein. Albumin is actually a protein that's made in the liver. And this protein, its job is basically to help fix inflammation. So the way I like to describe it to my clients and to my patients is when your albumin drops, which the range is 3.4 to 5, that's the general range. If you're feeling sick, if you have an illness, kidney disease, diabetes, high blood pressure, if you have some kind of illness, that can attribute to a lower albumin, because the albumin, I say it's kind of like it's being dispatched to go help take care of inflammation. So when I look at albumin, if it drops, I'm wondering, is there a change in the health condition that is utilizing albumin to go fix things, to go take care of things? So don't think that if your albumin is low, and especially to those in dialysis, especially for these cases, it doesn't automatically mean eat more protein.
Mhm.
This is a very old school nutrition thing. And even when I was in dialysis and when I first was trained, this is what they told us: albumin low, tell them to eat more protein. This is no longer the case, and we're looking at it as an inflammatory marker. So, for everyone, if your albumin is out of range, this is an indicator that something's going on. And this is where you want to talk to your doctor, you want to talk to your dietitian, you want to look at your things like your vitals, your blood sugar, your blood pressure. How are things looking? How are you feeling? Because if something is off, if you're not feeling good, it could be part of why your albumin's low. But you definitely want to talk with your healthcare team about why. This is again a symptom, not diet related.
Yep. Now, what about electrolytes? And I had to learn when I was in the hospital what electrolytes are. I've heard them throughout my life. I remember watching the movie Idiocracy. You know, they talk about electrolytes are in that juice that they're feeding the plants and everything. But I didn't know what electrolytes were until I had kidney problems. But they're very important and it covers a lot.
Yeah. So electrolytes, just as a quick nutshell, these are the ions that are like positively or negatively charged. If you want to think back to the periodic table of elements, you see sodium, which is the first electrolyte we'll talk about. Sodium is Na with a little positive. That positive is a positively charged electrolyte. And these electrolytes help with a lot of things, and we'll go into each one of them. Sodium, for one, is the most commonly found electrolyte outside of our cells, and it helps with things like our muscle function. Of course, it helps with our fluid balance, the sodium does. It helps with the cellular balance, it helps with acid and base, and even the osmotic pressure of our fluids. So basically, the pressure from the cell inside and outside. Now, people do automatically associate sodium with the diet. And if it's low, oh, good, I get to eat more salt. And if it's high, oh, I guess I better cut down on salt. There may be some of that involved in your case, but other things to look at would be specifically your fluid balance. If you're getting enough or too much water,
Mhm.
yeah. that can really offset it. And this is one of the labs that will be offset if you are chugging water before your lab draw. If you drink a lot of water, it can drop your sodium level and look like it's out of range when really you just diluted the sodium that you had in your body by adding all of that water in last minute. Oh, and the reference range for your sodium is about 135 to 145 in milliequivalents per liter. There we go.
Yeah, little m, big E, little q slash
Yes.
L. I posted
Yes.
it in the comments.
I was going to stumble over it. I should have known better.
Yeah, and then we also have potassium in addition to our
Yeah.
sodium, which is electrolyte.
Yeah. It is another electrolyte positively charged, positively associated with kidney disease because potassium is not something that you automatically need to be restricting. Make sure you talk with your healthcare team if you need to be on a potassium restriction. In general, potassium is between 3.5 to 5. If it's chronically above 5, that could be an indicator that you need to be careful with your potassium and your diet. But potassium is so important. Research has shown that potassium with a low sodium diet is actually more beneficial for blood pressure rather than just a low sodium diet alone. Potassium is very important in helping our heart contractions.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where it ties into the idea that too much or too little can cause cardiac arrest. Your heart will stop beating, it'll stop getting blood through your body, which is not a good thing. So that's why they talk about potassium being so important and being careful with it if your levels are high, because it can cause cardiac arrest, it can cause death. It's very important to be aware of potassium in your diet, how much potassium you should be having, and if you should be having more or less. But most Americans don't get enough potassium. So that's something I really I harp on, because when people start restricting it, if they're not eating enough, then you could be at a risk for having not enough potassium.
Yeah, and for those that are new out here who haven't heard me say this before, and Jen has said it also, we talk a lot about don't get too much, but too little can be just as dangerous. And I'm talking,
Mm-hmm.
deadly dangerous in some cases.
Mm-hmm.
So we're trying to find that Goldilocks zone where we stay in the normal range and we don't get too high or too low. That's what our goal is. And restricting potassium, especially when you were not directed by your doctor or your dietitian to do so, may not be a good thing for you, even though you know someone, same kidney function, that is restricting it because their doctor told them to. We're all a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
Don't self-prescribe things like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, the next one, this is one that I think a lot of people have a lot of confusion about, and a lot of the hacks online talk about this as a miracle thing that will restore your kidneys, heal your kidneys, reboot your kidneys. I've seen it all. And that is bicarbonate, which is also an electrolyte that is on our labs.
Yes, and this one's actually negatively charged. So bicarbonate, you might also see it as CO2 or carbon dioxide. This is essentially measuring the base. So you talk about the acid-base balance in the body. This is trying to balance these two sides out. And the bicarbonate in kidney disease typically tends to go down. This is something that is an effect, one of the effects from kidney disease, that it's not able to help with that balance. So the bicarbonate levels start to drop. In general, the range is between 20 to 29. Sometimes I've seen 22 to 32 as another range. So yours probably will be around that range as well. But again, it's more common as CKD progresses that we see that number decline. Not always, but I do see it quite often. And I love to talk about diet here because diet can be a huge thing to work on in helping your bicarbonate levels, because the acid that is not being as regulated, we can focus on PRAL, potential renal
Mm-hmm.
acid load.
We have a whole
PRAL,
show about that.
PRAL. We have a whole show. I've got a huge blog about it. We have a ton of information that talks about how this helps offset the acid that's kind of pushing down that bicarbonate. It's overwhelming that bicarbonate. Now, medically, your doctor might prescribe you sodium bicarbonate tabs, or they might tell you to take baking soda. But don't self-prescribe this because baking soda is very, very high in salt, like half of your day's worth of salt in just a little bit. So if you're to take this, this can really just cause other problems to come up and might not be the right solution for you. So you want to follow your doctor's prescription, whatever that is related to any kind of medication. But if you're looking for an excuse to get a referral to a dietitian, and if they start talking with you about your bicarbonate, this is a great time to slide in and just say, I'm pretty sure that nutrition could help me here. Can you refer me to a dietitian? And this is a really, really good opportunity to potentially avoid another medication. Not always, but I have had clients come off of sodium bicarbonate tabs just by making changes in their diet when we focus on PROW, essentially.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, anything to take less tablets is great. I already feel like I take way too many. I'm taking the one for uric acid. It's 2 pills. I've got all my blood pressure ones. I've got my renal multivitamin. I got my probiotic. I feel like it's a lot. And I would prefer, and I do this when possible, just adjust my diet so I don't have to take an additional pill. I don't have to remember to take it. I have my morning doses, my evening pills. The less additional, the better. And from my experience, when I talk to doctors, they prescribe taking sodium bicarbonate around a 22 or lower. But as Jen said, don't just start doing this yourself. If you don't need it, you're going to throw off your pH going the wrong way. You're not helping yourself. This is a supplement that doctors are recommending when you don't have enough to get you to where you need to be. It's not some magic cure-all that you can take that's going to fix things. Your doctor will prescribe it when you got a problem and you need a little bit more. All right, next.
Yeah, and you could even get metabolic alkalosis. So metabolic acidosis is the thing that causes too much acid. But if you overcompensate, if you're not taking it by a prescription, metabolic alkalosis is just as bad and you will not be feeling good that way either. So it's that swinging pendulum. You don't want to just go too far the other way.
Yep. Don't self-prescribe. That's the takeaway. Let your healthcare team, that's your renal dietitian, your doctors, tell you what you need, how much. All right, next, chloride.
So chloride is another one negatively charged, and this is also associated pretty strongly with your fluid balance. It also does help with the acid-base balance as well with that charge. The typical levels for chloride are about 98 to 107. And when I look at this lab, I am looking at a big picture of the fluid balance. So again, looking at sodium, looking at chloride, looking at weight, looking at blood pressure, all of these pieces of information are going to come together to give a good insight into the bigger picture of what's going on and not just looking at one and keeping everything else separate. So chloride can be related to fluid, but if it is abnormal, if it is out of range, high or low, that can be potentially indicative of a lot of other health issues. There's chronic lung disease, there's blood sugar issues, there's emphysema that it can be impacted by. So it's important not to just take that lab and think it must be this, it must be that. It's more of a conversation with your healthcare team to find out what other symptoms you're experiencing, what other labs are connected to that one that could be also out of range that would kind of associate with a certain diagnosis or situation, and then to talk with your healthcare team about what you should be doing to help fix that, whether it's figuring out how much fluid you should be having, or doing a medication adjustment, or looking at your acid-base balance and looking at that bicarbonate, things like that. But chloride is one that really helps kind of connect to other situations that we might not typically pay attention to.
All right, next, minerals, and one that we all, as kidney patients, are very familiar with, the sneaky snake, I like to call it, phosphorus.
Phosphorus. Phosphorus is that evil villain that I just like love to dive into because it's so intricate. It's like that evil villain who has this like whole complicated history and this childhood story that you're just like, oh my gosh, there's so much behind it. I love talking about phosphorus. So phosphorus is a mineral that is found in your body, and it is the second highest in storage and quantity in our body, right behind calcium, another mineral. Typically, phosphorus should be between 2.5 to 4.5. Now, for people in dialysis, we have a little bit of an extra cushion of what a normal level would look like, and that would be 3 to 5. So it's just slightly higher than the reference range is for CKD. But I do know dialysis clinics are starting to try to get it back down. They are focusing on helping patients get back down towards that regular reference range of below 4.5 because we know that long term, phosphorus causes a lot of chronic and painful complications. So the way I was explaining it this morning in the live was talking about the hardening of arteries. So when phosphorus, there's too much in the blood, it binds with calcium, it creates these little hard crystals that go and settle in your soft tissues, including your blood vessels, which your blood vessels should be flexible. Yeah, and it can cause itching.
Yes.
And when it's turning your soft tissue into hard tissue, your blood vessels that should be able to expand and contract to help control your blood pressure, they start to harden and then they can't adjust as much. And this is where more blood pressure issues can come up. And you have a higher risk for stroke and heart attack and other blood clotting issues because the blood pressure issues because the blood pressure can't be as best controlled when the arteries are rock solid. They can't flex. Think of it like the licorice or like the red vine candies compared to a piece of dried penne pasta. So it should be squishy and bendy and flexible, but then it turns into that piece of pasta. That is not going to be very conducive to control your blood pressure if it can't move. So it's really, really important to be paying attention to your phosphorus. And this is, once again, this is another type of lab. If your doctor is talking with you about your phosphorus and saying you need to make some changes, this is a great time to ask for a referral to a dietitian because phosphorus is our jam. We can help so much. And I have a whole article on plantpoweredkidneys.com about the low phosphorus diet. We focus on all the things that you can do and the things that you should eat. And we keep up with the times. We keep up with the recommendations that are current, which means we talk about things like whole grains and beans and legumes, things that were traditionally not encouraged. We know now that they can be a part of a phosphorus controlled diet. So ask to see a dietitian if your phosphorus levels are not where they should be.
All right, another mineral, and this one of mine is just slightly high. It was a bit high, and it's gotten just slightly high now. Calcium, which we always think calcium, good for you, your bones, your teeth, it's healthy. Guzzle some milk. But we got to be careful with calcium.
Yes, calcium is the number one stored mineral that is in our body. It is all in our bones, it's in our teeth, and it's important for not only our bone health, but also for muscle contraction. Very, very important for the way our muscles move. So calcium should be between 8.5 to 10.2, and this is a pretty flexible range. I see it on both sides where sometimes patients will have a low calcium level and sometimes patients will have a high calcium level. There are many causes as to why it would be out of range. In some cases, the low calcium might be because of a high phosphorus, that extra phosphorus is connecting with calcium and therefore dropping calcium levels. So take a look at your phosphorus and see if that is out of range as well. Again, a great time to talk with a dietitian about what you should be doing for these. Calcium supplements are not advised. The KDIGO guidelines say that we shouldn't even be using calcium-based phosphorus binders. So that's something to be aware of and be considerate of. High calcium levels can be associated with things like our vitamin D status. It can be associated with our diet. It can be associated with our lifestyle. So there are a lot of things that could potentially be related to your calcium, but because there's so many options, again, it's a really good thing to talk with your doctor about so that you don't go searching and trying to self-supplement or self-diagnose what this could mean.
Yeah, and calcium is one of those ones, stay off of Dr. Google. It's
Yeah.
all doom and gloom, the results. When I got mine, they were a bit high. I did a search. I'm like, I was shocked. I'm like, okay, I'll wait for the doctor. If it was this, he would have called me right away and said, come into the office.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Now we're getting close to the top of the hour, so I'm going to try to speed up a little bit. And for everybody, Jen has a blog all about this with way more than what we're going to be able to cover today on the plantpoweredkidneys.com website. Under blog, there's also a link down below in the description. Next is an energy one, and this is one that I always look at. Now mine looks good. It wasn't good in the beginning. Glucose.
Yes. Glucose is our body's number one source of energy. This is what we use. This is what our brain uses for fuel. So, the fuel for us to learn, it's something for our brain to be active. Glucose is really important. When you're looking at glucose in the renal function panel, typically, it's going to be between 70 to 100. This is where the fasting part comes in place. So, if you're not fasting, if you just ate before your lab draw, your glucose might be higher. As long as it's under 200, typically that's going to be okay. But this gets into more, again, of a conversation with your healthcare provider because if it's out of range, your doctor's probably going to be asking you more questions, might want to do a redraw to test again, might have you do a fasting glucose test, might get your hemoglobin A1C, which is another type of test for your sugars, looking at a bigger picture of how your sugars look in like 3 months or so. So this again is something that kind of opens the door depending on what your levels are. It opens the door into more discussion, more diagnostics, more lab tests to just figure out what's going on. And really important, if you do have diabetes, if you have any kind of blood sugar control problems, your goal might be different. It might not be that 70 to 100 because if you feel like junk in that range, that's probably not the place you should be at. So, in many cases, working with a dietitian that specializes in diabetes would be an excellent opportunity to find out what your range should look like. And then talking about tracking your levels, looking at your insulin, your medications for your blood sugars. So, these are really reference ranges in a general term, and getting that more personalized goal is going to be so, so helpful. So, talk with your doctor or your dietitian about what your levels should look like if they're not where you think that they should be, or if you don't feel good.
Now, let's jump to a couple of the calculations that are very important, especially the number one that we all look at as a kidney patient. The very first thing are eGFR, or our estimated glomerular filtration rate. And if you guys are new to being diagnosed with kidney disease, you're going to be able to say those words with no problem in the near future because it's that common.
Yeah.
For those that are kind of new to things, what is the GFR calculation?
So the GFR calculation is using your creatinine along with sometimes they'll do some other they'll look at some other lab tests depending on if you have those available or not. But this is how CKD is classified. This is how you get those different stages of kidney disease. So there's there's a lot of, I would say, questions and thought into the different stages, and really to me it goes back to how you feel. And you could be in a certain
Exactly.
stage, but it's a number. It's just a number on a piece of paper, and it's not giving us that insight of what's going on for you. So I'm not going to harp in too much of the GFR stuff here, just because I know a lot of you are very familiar with the GFR and the ranges and things like that. But what I do want to harp on is I want you to understand you're so much more than the number that your GFR shows. And it is not enough to look at that and say anything about your health, kidney or not. So that is something to look at and sure to track and talk with your doctor about. But at the end of the day, it's how you feel. It's how the rest of your labs, as a big picture, how everything
Mm-hmm.
looks. It's how your doctor's appointments go. It's how your food is. It's how your appetite is. So many other things go beyond the GFR. So it is a tiny, tiny piece of the pie,
Yes,
is my opinion.
100% agree with that. My GFR, everyone always asks me, James, what's your GFR? I don't care what my GFR is anymore. I've gotten to the point where I finally realize it doesn't matter. It could be a 27, it could be a 35. No difference to me. It's how I feel. Do I have any symptoms? Do I feel tired? Do I have energy? That's what
Hmm.
matters to me. Am I able to get up and go do the things I want? And let me tell you, summer's here. Every weekend, I'm going places. I'm doing things with the kids. We're having a blast. I don't care what my GFR is. I have the energy and the ability to do those things. I'm loving it. I'm thrilled. All right,
Hmm.
urea to creatinine ratio.
Yes. So this one is another term of it for it would be BUN to creatinine or BCR. This is just comparing the creatinine, the BUN and the creatinine. So it's dividing the two. The range is typically from 6 to 22, but again, you want to look at the individual numbers to see if there's any change in the ratio, what number changed to cause that. So for me, I don't put a ton of weight into this. Doctors might say otherwise because it is more medically related. I look at the individual numbers themselves, but this is also one of the tests that is included on the renal function panel that you can keep an eye out on just to see if you have significant swings. And if your BUN drops, if you eat more of a plant-based diet and your BUN drops, this number could also potentially drop. It could potentially increase depending on how your labs look. So think of it as if you see a big change there, if it's out of range, look at those other two numbers to see what those are telling you.
All right, now since we are quickly approaching the top of the hour, I'm going to skip over some
Ah,
of the other things. But guys, there's a link. You got to go check out the blog post, lots of stuff. Once I get my labs, Jen, I've got them.
mm-hmm.
What are the next things I should do? We talked about don't go on Dr. Google, don't refer to
Yeah.
nurse Facebook and get all worried because they're all wrong. What should I do now that I've got my lab results?
Well, the first thing is you should have some kind of plan in place to track your lab results. You can have your own chart, your own tracker, whatever the case is. But again, this is a kind of a snapshot of what's going on. You want to look at the big picture. You want to look at the overall trend to see what's going on. So take a look at how the big picture looks. What do your last two or three BUNs look like? What are your last two or five potassiums look like? And what is that telling you about what you're currently doing? So looking at that, looking at the big picture, it's almost like a physical step back and take a look at how it's all coming together. And then you really want to make a plan. And this has to do with talking with your doctor, reviewing the results, and saying, what is my next step? What is the next thing I should be focusing on? And when I work with my clients on this is where we kind of prioritize. We look at the labs, and I'm looking at it with my dietitian lenses to say, where is the biggest opportunity that we have? What is something that we can really focus on that can help keep your labs looking good or improve them? And you really want to have that list of priorities that you work with your team on so that you feel comfortable knowing that you're doing something that's good for you, but that you're not overwhelmed thinking you've got to do 20 different things to help address every single lab. And as a healthcare practitioner, we can look at that and say, oh, don't worry about that one. We'll get to it later, or it's not a concern, or we can really kind of analyze that and help you focus in on what your plan should be moving forward. And then in that plan, this can again lead to connecting with other healthcare practitioners that can further help you. So self plug, and it's not even a self, it's just it's a
All they have to do
dietitian plug.
is look at my success. It would not have happened without understanding nutrition, and I never would have gotten that correctly and accurately except from working with a renal dietitian. I 100% believe, 100%, everyone with kidney disease, you got to work with a renal dietitian. They are life-changing. Actually, they are life-saving. My doctors wanted me on dialysis 2.5 years ago, or 3.5 years ago, somewhere around there, a long time ago. Look at me. I'm healthy. I'm doing stuff, all because working with the renal dietitian, working with my doctors, not self-prescribing. So there, you're not plugging you're not doing the plug yourself. I plug the renal dietitians.
It's not even, I'm not even saying like you work with me, because I'm unfortunately, I'm still booked. I'm still full, but that's what I tell people. Don't wait for me. Find a renal dietitian to work with and get the ball rolling, get things going, because the longer you wait, the more you're missing out on opportunities that you could take care of early on.
Exactly. All right, so we're actually over the hour. I want to address a couple little comments real fast. Hey, yeah. Vicky said her GFR is 11. Her family doctor is upset she's done her dialysis. Hey, and her nephrologist says you can wait till 7. Your nephrologist is correct, Vicky. The standards now are recommending a 5, 6, or 7 GFR as long as they're able to control symptoms and you don't have anything serious going on. In the olden days, it was get you on dialysis right away, which is bad for your life expectancy and quality of life. So work with your nephrologist, Vicky. I agree with them. Dawn has a great question. This is a renal dietitian one. Her nutritionist, and I personally do not like the word nutritionist because it doesn't tell me anything. I can claim to be a nutritionist. I feel that I even know more than many of them that I've ran across online. And I am not going to be giving nutritional information to people. So that tells me, I don't like nutritionists. But the letters that matter, I don't know which ones. I just know registered renal dietitian, or renal dietitian is the one I want. What should people be looking for when they look at those letters?
Okay, so let's see. So MS, Master of Science, LDN would be licensed dietitian nutritionist.
Does that mean anything?
So, well, I don't know why they wouldn't have the RDN. Like mine is RDN, Registered Dietitian Nutritionist, CSR, Certified in Renal Nutrition, and then LDN, Licensed in Dietetics Nutrition. So maybe I would say check your nutritionist. If they have a website or even like a LinkedIn page or something, they might be able to list out their actual like credentials and what they all stand for, because CPT, like the first thing my head goes to is Certified Personal Trainer. So
could be.
I don't know if that's the case. Yeah, I don't know if that's the case. So I would definitely recommend asking them like what are your credentials listed out, because sometimes those all those letters that we put behind our name, and that's why sometimes like when I do my lives or anything, I just say I'm a renal dietitian, and I don't put all my letters because no one needs to translate that. I know what it is and I can translate it for you.
Yeah, very good. All right, so we are over. Thank you so much, Jen. Everybody else, tons of information on Jen's blog, plantpoweredkidneys.com. Let me bring up her website right there on the screen. You can go there. There's a link for the blog right on the top. Click there. You'll see this blog with everything we talked about and so much more, including lots of charts to help you better understand your labs. I want to thank you, Jen, for your time today. It's been great. And thank you, everybody out there, for joining us for this hour-long plus discussion. And I will see all of you next week in the next video. Bye, everyone.